I knew my own signature. 35 years building a franchise empire teaches you to recognize your handwriting on every document, every contract, every check. The pen stroke on the power of attorney form sitting in front of me wasn't mine. I set down my reading glasses on the mahogany desk in my home office and reached for my phone. Patricia, my accountant for the past 20 years, had just sent me a scan of documents she'd received from my attorney's office. Routine estate planning materials, she'd said, except I hadn't signed them. The date on the signature line showed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I was in Phoenix, touring a potential new franchise location. I was nowhere near my attorney's office in Chicago. My heart rate picked up, but I forced myself to stay calm. At 59, after building 217 franchise locations across the Midwest and South, worth $45 million by the last valuation, I'd learned to verify before reacting. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Patricia had received the wrong file. I dialed my attorney's number. Jonathan Barrett had handled my business affairs since I opened my 5th location back in 1998. He picked up on the second ring. Michael, good to hear from you. We're all set for next Tuesday's meeting, correct? Next Tuesday? Jonathan, I'm looking at documents dated from 3 weeks ago. Documents with my signature that I never signed. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, Michael. I haven't sent you anything in 3 weeks. Our meeting next Tuesday is when we're finalizing your estate plan. Nothing's been executed yet. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Then where did Patricia get these documents? What documents specifically? Power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and what looks like a modification to my will. I heard Jonathan's chair creak as he stood up. I'm opening your file right now. Michael, I drafted those documents, but they're sitting in my office, unsigned. We were going to review them together next week. If someone has signed versions, they're forgeries. Don't touch anything else. I'm calling the State Bar's ethics hotline, and then the police. Where are you right now? Home, in Lake Forest. Stay there. I'm coming to you. And Michael, don't tell anyone about this yet. If someone's forging legal documents, we need to know who and why before they realize we're onto them. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment, staring at the framed photo on my desk. Sarah, my daughter, at her college graduation. Her smile bright, her whole future ahead of her. She'd helped me open 3 locations during her summer breaks from Northwestern. She knew every aspect of the business. She also knew I was meeting with Jonathan next week. We'd talked about it over dinner just last Sunday at Gibson's Steakhouse. She'd seemed so interested in the estate planning process, asking detailed questions about power of attorney, about how assets would be managed if something happened to me. I pushed the thought away. Not Sarah. Not my little girl. She had a good job in marketing, a nice house in Lincoln Park with her husband Brandon. They were comfortable. She wouldn't. My phone buzzed. Patricia again. Michael, I'm looking more carefully at these documents. They came from an email address that looks almost like Jonathan's, but it's off by 1 letter. Barrett Law instead of Barrett Law Firm. I almost missed it. Who sent them to you? The email says they're from Jonathan's assistant, but when I call his office, his assistant says she never sent anything. Michael, someone is impersonating your attorney's office. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. Can you pull the last 6 months of account activity? Every account, business and personal. I can have that to you in an hour. Michael, what's going on? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. The next 2 hours were a blur of phone calls and document reviews. Jonathan arrived at my house with a partner from his firm who specialized in fraud. Patricia sent over account statements, and slowly, carefully, we began to piece together what was happening. Someone had been systematically preparing to take control of my assets. The forged power of attorney would give them authority to act on my behalf. The modified will changed the executor from Jonathan to someone else. The healthcare proxy would let them make medical decisions for me. It's a complete takeover plan, Jonathan's partner, David Chen, explained. With these documents, someone could walk into your bank, present the power of attorney, and start moving assets. They could change beneficiaries on your insurance policies. They could even put your business up for sale. But they need me incapacitated for this to work, right? They'd need me declared mentally incompetent or something? David and Jonathan exchanged a look. Not necessarily, David said slowly. If they present these documents and no one questions their validity, if no one calls you to verify, they could do significant damage before anyone realizes what's happening. By the time you found out, assets could be gone. How much time do we have? That depends on when they plan to use these documents. The fact that they sent them to Patricia suggests they're close to executing whatever plan they have. They probably wanted your accountant to have what looked like legitimate documentation on file. Jonathan leaned forward. Michael, I have to ask. Who knew about our meeting next week? Who knew we were working on your estate plan? I'd been avoiding this question for 2 hours, but I couldn't avoid it anymore. My daughter Sarah, she knew. We talked about it at dinner last Sunday. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe. Or recognition. Anyone else? Brandon, her husband. He was at the dinner too. I paused, remembering. Actually, Brandon asked a lot of questions. About the franchise business, about valuations, about how ownership would transfer. I thought he was just making conversation. He's always been interested in entrepreneurship. What does Brandon do? He had a consulting business. It went under about 6 months ago. Sarah said it was market conditions, tough economy for small consultancies. They had to let go of their staff, close their office. I stopped. They had to sell their house in Lincoln Park. They're renting now, somewhere in Lakeview, I think. Patricia, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Michael, do you remember that call 3 months ago when you authorized me to add Sarah as a signer on your operating accounts? You said it was temporary, just while you were traveling. I felt my stomach drop. I never authorized that. You called me from your cell phone. I have the recording. You specifically said Sarah needed access for business emergencies while you were doing the Southwest expansion tour. Patricia, I never made that call. We all sat in silence for a moment. Then David pulled out his laptop. We need to see that recording. Patricia played it through her phone. And there was my voice, clear as day, giving authorization to add Sarah to the accounts, except I'd never made that call. The conversation was seamless, natural, sounded exactly like me. Voice synthesis? David said quietly. AI can clone voices now with just a few minutes of audio. Your daughter would have hours of recordings of you, wouldn't she? Videos, voicemails, business calls. The room felt too small suddenly, too warm. My daughter, my Sarah, the girl I'd taught to read balance sheets when she was 12, the one who'd helped me negotiate the lease on location number 50, the one whose college fund I'd started when she was born, whose wedding I'd paid for, whose career I'd supported. She was trying to steal everything. Jonathan's voice cut through my thoughts. Michael, we need to move fast. If they have account access and these documents, they could act at any moment. We need to file emergency injunctions, freeze the accounts, and get the police involved. Wait, I held up my hand. Before we do anything, I need to know for sure. I need to know if it's really her. Michael, the evidence. I need to hear it from her. Patricia touched my arm gently. Michael, if you confront her, she might accelerate whatever timeline she has. She might try to move assets immediately. Then we protect the assets first. But I'm not calling the police on my daughter until I look her in the eyes and know the truth. The next morning, I called Sarah from my office. My hands were steady, my voice calm. 35 years in business teaches you to negotiate from a position of strength, even when you're terrified. Sarah, honey, I need to meet with you today. Can you come to the Lake Forest house? Dad, I'm swamped at work this week. Can it wait until the weekend? It's about the estate planning. I'd like your input on some things before my meeting with Jonathan. Silence on the line. Then, too quickly, of course. What time? How about 2 o'clock? I'll be there. I spent the morning with Jonathan and David preparing. They'd already filed emergency motions to freeze my accounts, pending a fraud investigation. Patricia had moved liquid assets to new accounts that Sarah didn't know about. Every document with my forged signature was photographed and cataloged. Are you sure you want to do this face-to-face? Jonathan asked. We have enough evidence for the authorities. She's my daughter. I raised her better than this. There has to be an explanation. David looked at me with something like pity. Mr. Thompson, in my 15 years handling financial fraud, it's almost always family. Money changes people, or maybe it reveals who they really were all along. Sarah arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. She looked the same as always. Professional, put together, that same smile she'd had since she was a little girl. She hugged me, kissed my cheek. Hey, Dad, how are you? I'm well. Come into my office. We need to talk. I'd set up the meeting carefully. The forged documents were on my desk, but turned away so she couldn't see them immediately. Patricia was upstairs in case I needed her. Jonathan and David were at Jonathan's office, on standby. So what did you want to talk about with the estate planning? Sarah settled into the chair across from my desk, crossing her legs. Actually, Sarah, I wanted to talk to you about these. I turned the documents around so she could see them. Her face didn't change at first. But I'd negotiated hundreds of deals, read thousands of faces across conference tables. I saw the momentary freeze, the slight widening of her eyes, the way her jaw tightened. What are those? But her voice was too casual, too studied. You tell me. They're estate documents with my signature on them. Documents I never signed. Documents that were sent to Patricia from a fake email address, pretending to be Jonathan's office. She looked at the papers, then at me. I don't understand. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying someone forged these documents, Sarah. Someone who knew about my meeting with Jonathan. Someone who had access to samples of my signature. Someone who had my voice on recordings and used AI to impersonate me to Patricia. That's insane. Who would do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I kept my voice level. Sarah, is Brandon in financial trouble? The question caught her off guard. What? No. I mean, his business had some rough patches, but we're fine. Are you? Because I heard you had to sell the Lincoln Park house. That's a significant change. Real estate market was good. We decided to downsize. Sarah, I let the silence hang between us. I'm your father. I've known you your entire life. Please don't lie to me. Something crumbled in her expression. Her shoulders sagged. Dad, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Brandon's business didn't just have rough patches. It collapsed. He had taken out loans, business credit lines. When the clients dried up, he couldn't pay them back. He owes $2.3 million, Dad. The house, our savings, everything went to try to keep the business afloat. We're drowning. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help? Because, she looked up, and there were tears in her eyes now. Because I'm 33 years old. Because I spent my whole childhood watching you build something from nothing. Because you taught me to be independent, to solve my own problems. Because I was ashamed that my husband failed, and I couldn't fix it. So instead, you decided to forge documents and steal from me? I didn't. She stopped. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. It was supposed to be early access to what would eventually be mine anyway. Brandon said if we just had some capital, he could restart the business properly this time. We'd pay it back before you ever noticed. We'd build something real. And when you passed away, decades from now, we'd already be successful enough that the inheritance would just be a bonus, not something we desperately needed. The logic was so twisted, so desperately rationalized, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Sarah, these documents don't give you early access to some capital. They give you complete control over everything. My business, my assets, my healthcare decisions. If something happened to me, you could make decisions about my medical care. Do you understand what you almost did? She was crying now, really crying. Brandon said it was just paperwork. He said it was smart estate planning. He handled all of it. I just told him about your meeting with Jonathan, about the documents you were working on. He said he had a friend who could help prepare preliminary versions. I didn't know he was forging your signature. I swear, Dad, I didn't know. But you suspected. You must have suspected something was wrong. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lawn where she used to play as a child. where I'd taught her to ride a bike, where we'd had birthday parties and graduation celebrations. Where had that little girl gone? What happens now? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Now we have a choice to make. I turned back to face her. The legal choice is clear. What you and Brandon did is fraud, forgery, identity theft. The documents are already with my attorneys. We've frozen all accounts. We could have both of you arrested today. Oh God, but that's not the choice I want to make. She looked up, confused. You're my daughter, Sarah. I love you. That doesn't change, even now. But I'm not going to enable this. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I sat back down, facing her directly. Here's what's going to happen. First, you and Brandon are going to meet with Jonathan tomorrow. You're going to provide every single document, every email, every recording, full cooperation. No more lies. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Second, I'm paying off Brandon's debt. All of it. Dad, no. Let me finish. I'm paying it off, but there are conditions. You and Brandon will both enter therapy, individual and couples. You'll work with a financial counselor, and you'll both sign agreements that you'll have no access to any of my assets while I'm alive. When I eventually pass, there will be an inheritance, but it will be in trust with conditions. Conditions about financial responsibility, about mental health, about proving you can handle money properly. Dad, I don't know what to say. Say you'll do it. Say you'll get help. Say you'll be honest with me from now on. Yes, of course. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. And I did. I could see the genuine remorse, the shame, the fear in her eyes. But sorry isn't enough. Actions matter. Choices matter. You made terrible choices, Sarah. Now you have to make better ones. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah asked, Why? Why are you helping us after what we did? I thought about that question. Your mother died when you were 15. Cancer. She made me promise to take care of you, to give you every opportunity, but also to teach you that actions have consequences. I've given you opportunities. Now it's time for the consequences. But consequences don't have to mean destruction. They can mean learning, growing, becoming better. What if we can't pay you back? What if the therapy doesn't work? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I believe in redemption, Sarah. I believe people can change if they want to badly enough. Your mother believed that too. She always saw the best in people. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She would be so disappointed in me. Yes, I said honestly. She would be, but she'd also want you to have a chance to make it right. The next few months were difficult. Brandon, it turned out, had been the primary architect of the scheme. He'd researched voice synthesis technology, created the fake email addresses, and forged my signatures. Sarah had been complicit, turning a blind eye to details she didn't want to confront. The debt was even worse than they'd admitted. $2.3 million in business loans, plus another $800,000 in credit card debt and personal loans. I paid it all off, not because I wanted to, but because I decided on a different kind of consequence, one that came with conditions and accountability. Sarah and Brandon went to therapy 3 times a week, individual sessions, couple sessions, and financial counseling sessions. They both had to submit monthly budgets to Patricia for review. They had to attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings. It turned out Brandon's business failure was partly because he'd been using business funds to cover gambling losses. The legal consequences were real too. They both signed consent agreements acknowledging the fraud, agreements that could be turned over to prosecutors if they violated any terms of our arrangement. They surrendered all access to my accounts. They provided full documentation of everything they'd done. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Brandon relapsed twice in the first 4 months, disappearing for days to Atlantic City, gambling away money they didn't have. Sarah called me, crying each time, desperate and ashamed. I could have walked away then. Part of me wanted to. But I'd made a commitment. And I was curious, in a way, to see if redemption was really possible. If people could truly change. Patricia thought I was crazy. Michael, you're rewarding bad behavior. she said over lunch about 6 months after everything came out. They stole from you, and you paid their debts. What lesson does that teach? It teaches that consequences don't always have to be punitive, I told her. It teaches that sometimes love means holding people accountable while also giving them tools to become better. It teaches that I believe actions matter more than words. And if they fail, if they don't change, then they fail. And they'll face legal consequences. But at least they'll have had a real chance. Jonathan was more pragmatic. You've protected your assets legally. The new estate documents are ironclad. Even if they tried something again, they couldn't. So from a legal standpoint, you've mitigated the risk. The question is whether you're enabling psychological dependence. Maybe I was. But I'd spent 35 years building a business empire. I'd opened 217 locations. I'd employed thousands of people. I'd created opportunities and wealth and success. But none of it meant anything if I couldn't extend the same kind of investment in potential to my own daughter. A year after everything happened, Sarah and Brandon came to dinner at the Lake Forest house. It was the first time I'd invited them back. They looked different, healthier. Sarah had a steadiness to her that hadn't been there before. Brandon had lost weight, looked clear-eyed. "Dad, we wanted to give you an update," Sarah said over coffee after dinner. "Brandon got a job, just a project management position at a consulting firm. Nothing fancy, but it's steady. And I got a promotion at work. We've been saving every extra dollar. We've paid off $15,000 of the debt we owed you." "You don't owe me money, Sarah. That wasn't part of the agreement." "I know, but we want to. We need to. Not because of legal obligation, but because it's right. We did this to ourselves. And yes, you helped us get out of the immediate crisis. But we need to build our own recovery." I looked at Brandon. "How's the therapy going?" "Hard," he admitted. "Really hard. Facing why I did what I did, why I thought stealing from you was somehow justified in my mind. But I'm 94 days without gambling. I go to meetings every day, and I'm learning that having less money but clear conscience feels better than any win I ever had at a poker table." "That's good, Brandon. I'm proud of you for that." He looked surprised. "You're proud of me? After everything?" "I'm proud that you're doing the work, that you're facing it. That takes courage." We talked for hours that night. About the business, about their therapy, about what they were learning. It wasn't perfect. There was still awkwardness, still pain. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But there was something there that hadn't been in years. Honesty, real conversation, not performance. As they were leaving, Sarah hugged me tight. "Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on us. Thank you for not giving up on yourselves." That was 3 years ago now. Sarah and Brandon are still together, still in therapy, though less frequently. They've paid back over $150,000, though I keep trying to tell them to stop, to save for their future. Brandon has been promoted twice, managing his own team now. Sarah started a side business, legitimately this time, teaching financial literacy to young professionals. The irony isn't lost on any of us. They have a daughter now, Emma. She's 6 months old. They asked if I wanted to set up a college fund for her. I said yes, but only if they contributed too, matching every dollar I put in. They agreed. I revised my will again last year, with Jonathan. Sarah is no longer the primary beneficiary. Most of my assets will go into a charitable foundation I'm establishing, one that provides business loans and financial education to struggling entrepreneurs. Sarah will receive a trust that releases funds as she meets certain milestones. Continued therapy, financial stability, demonstrating responsible decision-making over time. She knows about these terms. She helped me design them. "It's fair," she said when Jonathan presented the revised documents. "More than fair. You're still giving me more than I deserve." "I'm giving you what I think will help you most," I told her. "Money without wisdom is dangerous. Wisdom without support is insufficient. You need both." People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it, if I should have pressed charges, taught a harder lesson. Maybe they're right. Maybe I was too soft, too forgiving. Maybe I enabled something I shouldn't have. But when I hold little Emma, When I see Sarah teaching financial responsibility workshops, when I see Brandon celebrate another year of sobriety, I think maybe redemption isn't about perfect justice. Maybe it's about creating conditions where people can become better than they were, where mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define a whole life. I'm 62 now. The franchise business is stable, thriving even. Location 230 just opened in Nashville. But the business isn't what keeps me up at night anymore. It's not what I think about when I'm driving home. What I think about is second chances, about the difference between consequences and punishment, about the kind of legacy that matters. My attorney Jonathan still thinks I took a huge risk. Patricia agrees, though she's softened over time. They both point out that statistically, most people who commit fraud don't change. Most families fractured by financial betrayal never heal. Maybe that's true. Maybe we're the exception. Or maybe we just decided that being an exception was worth trying for. I still verify every document, still check every signature, still maintain clear boundaries about financial access. Trust, but verify, as they say. The trust is rebuilding, slowly, but the verification stays constant. That's not cynicism. That's wisdom. You can believe in redemption and still protect yourself. You can forgive and still maintain boundaries. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. Sarah calls every Sunday now. Sometimes we talk business. Sometimes we talk about Emma. Sometimes we just talk. Last Sunday, she told me that her financial literacy workshops are expanding. A local community college wants to hire her to teach a full course. I was thinking, she said, maybe I could use our story, obviously anonymized, but teaching people about how financial pressure can make you rationalize terrible choices, how debt can feel like drowning, how to ask for help before you do something you can't take back. Would you be comfortable with that? I think I need to be. I think that's part of making it mean something, taking the worst thing I ever did and using it to help other people avoid the same mistakes. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at that same photo of Sarah at her college graduation. She looked so young in that picture, so certain of her future. She'd had no idea what was coming, the failures, the desperation, the terrible choices. But she also hadn't known about the redemption, about the slow, difficult work of rebuilding, about becoming someone better than who she'd been. I used to think success was measured in franchise locations and bank balances. Maybe it is, in part. But I've learned it's also measured in second chances given and taken, in the courage to hold people accountable while also believing they can change, in the wisdom to know that love sometimes means tough conditions, clear boundaries, and unwavering support all at once. The forged documents are locked in a safe in Jonathan's office, along with all the evidence of what happened. We keep them as a reminder, not because I think Sarah and Brandon will try something again, but because remembering where we've been helps us appreciate where we are. It's not the ending I would have written 3 years ago. When I first discovered those forged signatures, when I first realized my daughter had betrayed me, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe some things were unforgivable, but I was wrong. Some things are unforgivable if you choose not to forgive them. And some things become doorways to something deeper, something more real, if you're willing to walk through them together. Emma's first birthday is coming up next month. Sarah and Brandon are having a party. Just family, small gathering. They asked if I'd speak, say a few words. I said yes. I think I'll talk about second chances, about how the best investments aren't always in businesses or real estate. Sometimes they're in people, in their potential to become better than they are, in their capacity for change. And I'll talk about how love isn't blind. It sees everything, all the flaws and failures and terrible choices, and it chooses to believe in possibility anyway. That's what 35 years of building a business taught me. Not just how to negotiate deals or manage franchises, but how to invest in people, how to see potential even in the worst circumstances, how to build something worth having. The franchise empire will outlast me. The money will be distributed according to my carefully planned estate. But the real legacy, the one that matters, is this. I taught my daughter that mistakes don't have to be the end of the story. That change is possible. That redemption is real if you're willing to do the work. And maybe, just maybe, she'll teach that to Emma someday. And the cycle will continue, not of betrayal and fraud, but of accountability and growth, of falling down and getting back up, of being better today than yesterday. That's worth more than $45 million. That's worth everything.